Hey there. I thought what I would do today is talk a little bit about a topic that was suggested to me by the man, the myth, the legend, Pierre Miller. And at some point, him and I were having a conversation. I'll spare you the details, but he said, I think what you should do in this case is do a video on how you select pens to review. And I actually thought that was very interesting. So I'm getting the impression that people enjoy videos like this, where I don't review a product, but where I talk about pen-related things. And in this case, I thought what would happen is I talk a little bit about that process. And at best, this is interesting, and at worst, this is just a little bit of an insight in the reviewing process, which I'm getting the feeling some people find interesting as well. So, let's talk about that. How do I select a pen for review? Well, the answer to that question depends a bit on when you would ask me. I started a long time ago, right? Reviewing pens long time ago. And at that point, I reviewed pens because I bought pens. And whatever I would buy, I would review. And those older videos are, in my mind, fairly dreadful because I ramble a lot, still ramble, but that's kind of the charm of my personality. But it was way worse. And at that point, the decision process of how to select a pen for review was simple. I bought all kinds of things, and I was kind of going along with certain trends. TWSBI came along, and I bought every new TWSBI that came out. And I tried to sample different kinds of pens. So for example, I would try to sample different filling systems, different nibs, different nib materials. Initially steel, well actually, yeah, the first nicer pen I bought had a gold nib, but I also got steel nibs, different nib grades, fine, medium, broad, that kind of stuff. It was through my friend Sven that I met early on, who convinced me to try broad nibs, because at that point I was kind of going for medium nibs only. And he said, no, you should always use a broad nib, and if you can't use a broad nib, then you have to practice until you can, which I thought was a very good way of putting it. And that's kind of what got me started on broader nibs. And so there is that. Then there was materials, pen materials. Try out plastic, try out a celluloid, try out an acrylic, try out these kinds of things. At some point I want to do a video on pen materials, by the way, but that's not this video, I'm just saying. So my choice of what to review was really inspired by what I was purchasing, what I was getting, what I wanted to try out. Different filling systems, that's another good way. I wanted to try a piston filler and a vacuumatic filler and, you know, all this kind of stuff. I wanted to try a vintage pen. I wanted to, not trying a vintage pen is something like saying I want to try a red car. I mean, that's kind of weird, of course, but I wanted to try out something antique that we as pen people call vintage for some reason and not antique. But anyway, but things started to shift a little bit when at some point, I remember that moment, the first company that ever approached me and said, would you like to review one of our products, was Cross, which is interesting because Cross is a larger company. I was expecting something more from maybe a smaller company, because I wasn't quite convinced that a larger company would notice me or would be interested in sending me something to review. And it turns out that most large companies aren't. Even now, when I am, what is it, I think now approaching 54,000 subscribers, something like that, something in the 50,000 range. I've never been contacted by Montblanc, for example. I did once contact them and ask them if I could review one of their pens, and I was allowed to review it, but I had to send it back in 3 days. So I didn't go with that. but which is not a dig at Mont Blanc, but I can't do that for 3 days. So that was interesting. So even now, what is interesting is that the large companies, I think, still don't notice me, which is perfectly fine. I also think that it's really not necessary for, say, a Mont Blanc to send sbrebrown a pen to have it reviewed. I think they have enough sales as it is. But what I have found is that there are two kinds of companies that do send me products to review. Often it is the somewhat smaller companies who create products. I'm thinking, for example, of take something like Lockbee. It's not a pen company, but that makes notebook covers. Chris, the owner, reached out to me, so it's that kind of company. And also pen shops. I find that pen shops reach out to me and say, hey, is there anything that we have that you would like to review? And for the record, also often, especially with pen shops, it's a matter, especially in the more expensive segment, of we will lend you this, right? I always like to emphasize that. So it's not that I get to keep all these products. I would say much, if not most, depends a bit on the time of the year sometimes, but most of what I get into review I also send back. So there has been a shift in me selecting what I would review. Has shifted to companies reaching out and saying, hey, we have the new X, would you like to review this? And then me typically saying yes. And the reason I bring all this up is that sometimes that can influence the content on my channel a bit. And so, for example, at some point, the reason the whole discussion with Pierre started was that someone had commented, and this was in my mind, a perfectly bona fide comment on Patreon, actually, saying this is yet another Leonardo review. Like, is this company really... She didn't say that, but I think the assumption was it's a new company. Is it really worth to do so many reviews on Leonardo products? Which, again, is a very fair question. And that's when Pierre said, well, that's why you have to do a video on explaining how you get these products. And I think he was right. So that was an example of, in a short period of time, Leonardo released a couple of pens. There was the Cuspide. I hope I get the stresses right now. The advantage of being in this community is that a lot of people help me out with the pronunciation of these things, for example. I don't speak Italian, so it's nice. Cuspide, I think it was. So there was the Cuspide, there was the new Momento Zero Grande with the new piston came out, and then the Furore Grande came out. I've also now learned it's not Furore, but Furore. So in a short amount of time, I did indeed review quite a couple of Leonardo, so I could fully... It's probably also Leonardo, isn't it? We learn as we go. So yes, in a short amount of time, there was quite a bit of Leonardo. And I also understand how someone would think, why in 3 weeks, why would you review 3 Leonardo pens? Well, because at that point in time, Salvatore, who makes the pens, sent me 2, and Joost Appelboom from Appelboom Pennen in the Netherlands sent me the Cuspide, lent me the Cuspide. So that's why, right? And make no mistake, I'm not doing this video because I'm trying to defend myself or something. I'm just trying to give you that insight, and that's how those choices are made sometimes. And I mean, of course, I do find myself purchasing a pen once in a while, and I also reach out to companies saying, you know what, I got a lot of review requests for this. Could you spare one? And often the pen companies, I don't want to... I feel like I kind of want to mention them, but I also kind of don't. I don't want to give the impression I'm trying to make a commercial here. But when I go to Appelboom, La Couronne de Conde, Gold Spot, Goulet pens, often they will send me a certain pen or lend me a certain pen that I get a lot of review requests for. And obviously I'm very grateful, but I think that we should all be grateful, because if you are watching this video, then I'm assuming you like my content, and I can create that content because people lend or send me things, right? Otherwise, I mean, I do not have the funds to buy so many pens that I can do 2 fountain pen videos a week. Anyway, so there has been that shift, and I have not found that an unpleasant shift, because I have access to a lot of pens that way to continue to shape my opinion on pens, on pen-related paraphernalia, notebook covers, that kind of stuff. So that's kind of it. That's how those decisions are made. And sometimes it is a matter of often a pen shop emailing me saying, listen, I'm getting in this and that next week. Do you want to review any of these products? And again, most often those products are also returned, right? This is not S.B.R.E. Brown enrichment or something. I return most of those products. So that's it. I don't know if this was interesting for you to hear, but I thought it would be interesting to, and again, if I say address, that sounds like I feel like I have to defend myself. I don't feel that. I just thought it might be maybe interesting to some people of getting a bit of an insight in that process of how that works. And before I start to ramble too much and make this too long of a video, I think this is probably where I should leave it at. And that's kind of it. So if there are other questions that you have about the process of reviewing, then by all means feel free to leave a comment, and I'd be happy to address that in another video. I mean, again, I have the feeling that people enjoy sometimes hearing me talk about these kinds. Well, that sounded really arrogant. I mean, hear me talk about these kinds of topics. And so yeah, let me know, please. I hope this was useful, and I'll gladly see you later. Bye bye.